If I Could Tell You Just One Thing is an event industry podcast presented by me, Mel Noakes.
And me, Max Fellows.
It's a podcast from Elevate, where industry leaders write a letter to their younger selves and consider what wise words of advice they would give themselves now if only they could.
Our discussion is based on this letter. Be prepared for refreshingly honest conversation and wise words of wisdom.
Our guest on today's episode has been called the Prince of Pop-Ups, Tycoon of Temporary Restaurants and Baron of Barbecues, and the Sunday Times called him London's Pop-Up King. Jimmy Garcia runs his hugely successful catering business like a creative agency, designing brand experiences with food for clients that include Google, Meta, Netflix, Pinterest and Spotify. He's a zero food waste champion with a passion for seasonality, locality and provenance that ensures his food not only tastes and looks incredible, but also tells a story. His thrilling career journey to date has been a roller coaster ride. Welcome to the podcast, Jimmy.
Thank you.
What an intro.
I'm blushing. I know,
what an intro.
Just a few subtle brands there as well.
Yeah, just a bit of dropping.
So Jimmy, for those that don't know you, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Who is Jimmy, and equally then what do you do and why do people know you?
So my name's Jimmy Garcia, from Jimmy Garcia Catering and Jimmy's Pop-Up. So I run pop-up restaurants throughout London, in some of the biggest high footfall locations in London, really. So Somerset House and the South Bank. And then another side of my business is event catering. So we, like you just kindly mentioned, we service lots of media brands, corporates, and obviously high net worth private clients as well. So about 70% of my business is split across that side, so the events, and 30% is in the pop-ups world. So that's my business, and that's how we do. Yeah.
And before we get into it, if we were going to go out for dinner right now and I was going to cook,
I was going to ask that.
what would be your last?
Yes.
Well, I will change that. What would be your favourite meal? The last meal that you could possibly have? Death
Are you
row.
cooking?
You can
Probably not. Actually, Max is a great
I'm
cook.
quite good, but
Yeah, right, okay.
Last meal.
Well, do you know what? So I've been out. So there's a couple of things that. So I've got my favourite restaurant in London, but I reckon my last meal on earth would probably be my mum's lasagna. I reckon it's really good, mate. Like it's a banger. So yeah, she's got all the crispy bits on the outside, and there's just lots of memories of sitting around that kitchen table with all my sisters and stuff.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, that's got a nice segue in then, in terms of your mum's cooking and things like that. Tell us a bit about your childhood.
That's the only thing she could cook, by the way.
Was
Yeah.
One hit
She was
wonder.
really good at it, but that was about it. And then the rest my dad would do, but yeah.
Okay. We obviously you're on the sofa now, and thanks again for joining us. We've asked you to write a letter to your younger self, and we've taken you back to the age of 21. What I'd love to do is kind of start by going a little bit further before, and you talked about your mum's lasagnas. There's great memories and things, but tell us a little bit about Jimmy growing up and what kind of you're like as a kid and up to that age of 21.
Had a lot of energy. So I grew up in Wakefield, where dreams are made and hearts are broken. And
sounds like a Take That single.
Exactly. Yeah, you can tell I've used that line a lot of times, mainly in bars with women. But I maybe leave that behind. But I grew up in Wakefield. My parents both were market traders, so I used to do curtains and carpets in Wakefield, and I would go around. Well, obviously, there weren't many people. My dad was called Jesus, or spelt Jesus. So the amount of time, and the house phone was the work phone, so everyone would ring the house phone and would ask for Jesus. He's a bit busy at the moment, but it's Sunday.
Christmas time is particularly busy.
Well, exactly, exactly. It's his birthday coming up, so but no, so that was what we had in Wakefield, and if I'm honest, my mum and dad used to work incredibly hard. So it was 6 days a week. Sunday was church, and that was the day off. And they instilled into us pretty quickly that if you want something, you need to work really hard for it. So it was a lovely childhood. My mum and dad, I would say my mum and dad didn't have a lot, but they always made sure that we had everything we ever would want and needed. And I think only when you get a bit older, I realise this, but when you get older, you realise, and when you have kids, you realise the sacrifices that they made to actually because when you're a kid, you just think your mum and dad are there to live for you. You know what I mean? And then when you have kids, you're like, oh God, actually they've done a lot. Yeah, actually you realise that. And I think that was a big realisation for me. So I always loved food. My dad's Spanish. So food has always been kind of in our DNA. And my Dad was always his way of relaxing was cooking. So like he'd work in the market all day, get back at 6 o'clock, and he would go straight into the kitchen with a bag of food that he'd bought from the butcher or that he'd bought from the greengrocers, and would then just get to cooking dinner for us that night. And my best food memories, or my best memories with my dad, are always been based around food, because that was the big connection that we had, really. Like, so.
Would you get involved helping him, or would it be more so just watching?
Well, to start with, I was really young. Not so much, more just hearing my sister saying, "There's too much garlic." Everything. Spanish, you know what I mean? So that was always a big argument. Anything we'd taste with my sisters, no matter what, there'd be too much garlic. My sisters, like the ugly sisters, like much older than me and much. They were highly strung. So there was like that period. And then when I got to a little bit older, we'd used to, remember Football Italia?
Yeah.
James Richardson? Yeah. Vividly in my memory, we used to watch Football Italia together after church on a Sunday, and we'd have like lamb's kidneys together. And like that, remember that being like our little obsession that we'd kind of do together. And those little memories really. So, and then a big thing for us, like on a Sunday roast, we'd have Sunday roast, but then the big thing was if we had guests around, my dad would get the paella pan out, and that was like, he's cooking tonight.
Serious.
It's on.
Exactly. So we'd have like amazing cured meats that we get, like proper good cured meats. My dad actually imports our cured meats now for us through the business. So amazing cured meats. And then we'd always have this big paella that everyone would have together. And then my dad's go-to was like these really good poached pears just at the end, just for dessert. And then get the after eights out. Exactly. And I was allowed a glass of Schlur, because that was like,
Did you have Viennetta in your household? The Viennetta ice cream? That was always like the height.
Love Viennetta, yeah. Oh my God. It's made a renaissance, like I had it in our house not so long ago, and it doesn't taste as good as I remember. If I'm being
so retro, it's come back and it's cool again.
If I'm being totally honest, it tastes of a nostalgia, but not much else.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a shame.
Take that.
But yeah, it was like a very happy house, a very busy house, and my mum, an open door policy throughout my whole house. So my mum actually ended up setting up a charity in Kenya, and like there used to be a running joke with my mum, was like, we had her 70th last year, and we did a little bit of a speech for my sisters, and we're just saying like, one minute there'd be like a Kenyan who was living with us for a year in the house, who came from the church. Then there was a Chinese student for 6 months who lived with us. Then there was a recovering alcoholic that my mum took under her wing and took her into her house. Then there was a woman my mum met in home base who like who turned out was like, I think he was hard on his luck or whatever, and she invited him back to dinner, and he ended up staying for like 3 nights. And I remember my sisters being like, "This is mad, Mum. Like this has to, like this can't carry on." But that openness and that open door policy was something that we've always adopted, and something that I always knew that when I was older, I wanted to be accepting of people. So yes, it's kind of, and I only realise now more so as I get older how much I probably am like my mum, like, which is just slightly scary. She's a woman, but like slightly scary in that sense. But also like pretty amazing woman. So.
And it comes across in your letter really nicely. You talk about those moments with Papa G where you've like sit down with some pasta and watch the football and stuff. So how did you ever consider catering or food as a career when you were younger, in those sort of moments, cooking together?
To be honest, so there's more on it really. So actually, when my cooking kind of really started as I got a little bit older, and then it started with high school. No one's going to be at home when you get back home. So, like, if you're hungry,
you're on your own.
You should probably try and figure out how to cook something. So it started with like get home, Heinz tomato soup, ham and tomato sandwich, and Neighbours, and then dip it. Watch your Neighbours, dip that, and wait for Hollyoaks at 6:30. Like, that was our life.
There are people literally listening to this that have no idea who Neighbours are or Hollyoaks.
Oh no, I think
Hollyoaks is still going.
Is it?
Is it still going?
And like Neighbours is on channel like 42 or something now, I think. Like, but yeah, so that's how it started. And then my mum introduced, we started to get leek and potato soups, because she made an amazing leek and potato soup. So she'd show me how to do that, and I could make that. Carrot and coriander. So it started with the easy bits like that. And then like always baking and things like that with mum. And then when I actually went to, just before we went to university, when I was at high school, I started to realise I could probably quite impress the ladies with this as well. So I was like, started to get into cooking a little bit more. And I used to have these dinner parties at like end of high school and then college, and I charged, basically I'd say to everybody, £10 each. So all my mates would put a tenner in. I'd go and buy like food for like 4 courses. I'd go for it. And then any leftover money, we'd buy booze. So we used to have like these little parties basically with all of our like really close friends, And I used to love hosting, having my friends around, kick my mum and dad out till like 11 o'clock or something, and then have a bit of a do.
That sophistication of doing at 16 4-course dinner parties where everyone else is on the golf course
Well,
with tinnies getting pissed.
We used to go to the rugby club. That was where we'd go, so to the stands afterwards. I would say he wasn't very civilized after we'd eaten. It was like, pretty raucous.
I like how you started though. Start
well. Yeah, exactly. Start classy and finish into like not so classy. That's the way, isn't it? So that was again what we were doing. And then when I went to university, I carried that into uni as well. So we had like all of our mates, and I was working at Revolution at the time, and I was like, right, everybody put a tenner in and we'll do that, and just started to turn into a bit of a thing that we do every few months. And then before university anyway, I had a job as a starter and dessert chef, and a commie chef basically, in a restaurant called Wolski's, and which is in Wakefield. And I just would be like plating up desserts, plating up starters, like basically working on the weekends, working the odd night in the week, and kind of got a real feel for like professional and it was harsh in there, like I remember before I actually got given the opportunity to actually plate and stuff, I'd be pot washing. I remember like one day leaning against the back of my sink because I'd done all the pots that needed to be washed, and I remember the chef just going, "What are you doing?" I went, "I've washed everything." And he just grabbed 2 eggs, threw them into the corner of the kitchen and went, "You wash them." I was like, okay. So yeah, that's that. And then I remember a couple of days after that, they said to me, "If you eat a whole bulb of garlic, we'll let you go home and we'll pay you for the shift." I was like, "Serious?" And like, "Yeah." I was like, "No sweat." So I chowed down this bulb of garlic, and then they're like, "Fuck off, get back to your section." I was like, "Oh, what?" So I won't do that again. But just a note to self: it sweats out of you for about 3 days. So so don't do it. All right, it's not worth it. Yeah. So that was my first foray into like professional kitchens, really. Then, and then that's kind of really when I still didn't think that I was going to take it for a career, but I started to realise that if I could cook, I could travel, and I had a real passion for travelling. So when I finished college, before university, I went travelling for a year, and I got a job. To be honest, I didn't work for the first 6 months. I went 5 months. I went travelling around Thailand and Cambodia and Vietnam and Laos, and then went to New Zealand for a month. And then went to Australia with no money left, and was like, right, I had to go and get a job. But before that, to save money to go travelling, I worked in a restaurant. So I worked in a butcher's in the day. So from 7 till 6, I'd do the butcher's, and then I'd go to the restaurant. And on my way, my mum would drive me to the restaurant, and I was working front of house there. She'd drive me to the restaurant. On the way to the restaurant, I'd be like spraying the deodorant, get myself the smell of raw meat and sausages cleaned off me, and then I'd go and work a shift in the evening. And I just worked like a dog for 4 months, and there was no time to spend the money, and I could just save it all and then go travelling. And travelling again was a bit of a point of like. Just really finding who. It sounds like a massive cliche, but at 18 years old, going around the world, I went with 2 friends, and after 2 weeks, left them to it, and been on my own. You just learn
a lot about yourself.
You learn a lot about yourself, and you learn that actually you're all right. You know what I mean? Like you're actually all right, and people, you get on with people and stuff. And I think that was a big confidence booster and a big moment in my life for sure.
Do you think everyone should go travelling?
I don't think it's for everybody, but I think it takes you out of your comfort zone. I think in a way that makes you can either sit for 10 months in a corner and meet nobody and read books, but you're going to hate it, or you can embrace it that loads of people in the same position as you, and all they really want is to go and have some fun and meet people. Yeah. And like for me, I could probably forget about the places I went, but I won't forget the people I met. I think, you know what I mean? Like, I went to some amazing places, but the things that I remember the most are the people that I was with and the times I had with them, for sure.
So obviously with this brilliant sort of introduction to food and the sort of Spanish influence and cooking at home, the obvious thing to do at university is an economics and business degree.
Yeah.
So tell us how you came to choose that and where you went to.
Again, so it's all a bit confusing, growing up. I think for everybody, when you're at school, and I remember, my parents just wanted better for us. They always wanted us to be better, to have better, and that for them in their heads was, go to university, be a lawyer or a doctor. If you're clever, be a lawyer or a doctor, and that's success, And so obviously I worked quite hard at school. Well, I was very cheeky at school, and then I got to about 14 and realised I should probably get my head down here because it's probably the time to do it. But what I would say, looking back now, is you take it seriously, but it's not the be all. I remember that time getting so worked up about those exams and stuff like that. It's just not worth it, because there's a whole world out there that kids don't know about, which is like working and and meeting people, and that doesn't need a degree, you know. So yes, I think that was a pretty good point, really.
So you were saying then about the business economics degree, and you can explain a little bit more of how much you enjoyed that or didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, so it was about how I got to that point, I guess, of the business economics degree.
Yeah.
Sorry. So yes, it is all a bit confusing when with kids at school. I found, and I was the same. You know, I don't really know what I want to do, and I think it's 14 when you got to choose your GCSE choices. I mean, it's mental to think that anyone at 14 years old knows what to do with their life, right? So I actually first was like, oh, do you know what? I love football. I'm going to go and do a physiotherapy degree. So I actually went to Northumbria to do physiotherapy, and I had been travelling, had this like amazing time. Got home from travelling, said to my parents, I don't want to be a physiotherapist. I'm pretty certain I don't want to be a physiotherapist. So what do you want to be? I said, I think I want to be a teacher. And they were like, you don't want to be a teacher? And I was like, I think I do. And I didn't really know what I wanted to be. So they went, go to university, give it a go and see what happens. And if you don't want to do it, fine. Oh, yeah, that's that. And I went, and I remember being in these physiotherapy lectures, and like nothing to do with the amount that I was drinking the night before, but having these just like hot sweats of like panic, of being like, I don't care about any of this, like I don't care, you know, like, and having these moments of just be like, I need to get out of here. So got to about November, and I was like, I'm not gonna do this, and I transferred, and then I went traveling I went to go and do a ski season. So I went on holiday with my sister for a week, with my sister and her friends for a week, and then ended up getting a job on the last day, and stayed there for the whole winter. So this was in Val d'Isere. They then drove me to Courchevel, which was where the job...
If you're going to do it well, guys.
Well, yeah, it was all right, yeah. Which was where the job was. So I went, and then, went to Courchevel, and she was like, can you cook? I was like, yeah, I can cook. And she looked, she said, we'll take a chance. So we'll go to Courchevel. So I did it, and I ran a chalet there for the winter. And again, this is all people you meet, right? So one of my clients was the creative director of Big Brother. Ran Endemol, basically. I got on with him incredibly well. And he was like, I was thinking about going to do law, right, in September. Because again, just had no idea what to do. And he was like, you don't want to be a lawyer. He's like, why don't you come and like do some running with me on Big Brother for the summer? And I was like, yeah, all right. So I finished in May, went to go and work on Big Brother for the summer, and like had the best time. And then was like, right, I'm going to do a degree in September, but I'm going to do something that's generic so it keeps my options open when I finish. And hence business and economics was what I set on. So yes, it's quite that then Phil, who I met and was doing the Endemol stuff. Now we do lots of events. He's now the head of Sky Arts. We do lots of events for Sky. His daughter's Daisy Edgar Jones, who's from Normal People. So we do lots of little bits for her as well. So it always stands you in good stead to like I say, just get on with people. You know,
that's a running theme, and we'll come back to that because there's a comment that you made in your letter later on as well. But this ability to kind of connect and befriend and create these relationships with people, but where people will see it as a passing thing. It was lovely to meet you, see you later type of thing. You seem to have a real ability to maintain them and through decades, quite literally in some cases. Is that something that is naturally built into just, keep in touch and things like that? Or is it something you work hard at in terms of...
I think it's funny. Like I think for me, I think you should be nice to everybody, right? Like unless someone does you really wrong, like what's the reason to not be nice to people? And I think I like to think that most people in the world, almost everybody in the world, has good intentions. Whether they get it right or not every time, but I think everybody means well. You know what I mean? Like I don't think there are many like nasty people in the world. And I think being open with people and being honest with people and warm, is like that gets reciprocated by people who are honest and warm as well. And then there's this network of people that just kind of like get on, And I don't think it's not necessarily something I worked at. I think if you're passionate about something, and for example, Phil Edgar Jones and the guys I work with there and at Sky, I wouldn't be doing events for Sky if just because Phil and I get on with him doesn't mean I'm going to be doing events for Sky at all. It means that there's a slight opening of a door, but then we've got to go and prove ourselves, and we've got to go and do the work, and we've got to deliver, because otherwise, you're only as good as your last event, and that's definitely the case in our industry. There's too many people out there doing really good work to rest on your laurels. But no, I think like if you're passionate about something, you are talking about something because you're into it, not because you're like trying to get something out of someone or trying to get a deal. And I think subliminally, yes, maybe that is what happens, that you do get like thing. But I always say positive things happen to positive people, right? And I think
I firmly believe in that.
And and if you go out there and you put it out there, it'll come back.
So we were talking about it prior to coming in, and the word of networking is quite a
dirty word.
It's a dirty word, and networking as a principle and an act feels like it's quite suited ties and coming at you for business. But what was interesting and kind of where I was leading to with that question about this relationship building, and you made the point earlier about it's the kind of almost a byproduct of just being nice and things. So I wonder if you were starting again or speaking to someone and they were thinking, right, how do I build that kind of relationship group or network? What would you say is the better way to go about it?
It sounds like, I'd say honestly, you're not going to be able to please everybody. In terms of that like networking thing, sometimes you'll just get a rapport with people and you'll just get it and it'll click. And they're the ones that are going to be the ones that you're going to be friends with in 10 years' time, who are going to be you're going to be the go-to guy for their jobs. You don't need to schmooze them, you don't need to butter them, because you just have a good relationship. Like they're the best ones, right? And I just, there's a little element of like just finding your tribe with people, like, and being like genuinely interested in what people got, and finding a genuine connection with someone, not just like pretending that you love golf and then you go for a day of golf with them and you're terrible, and all of a sudden it's like, well, you know what I mean? Like I don't play golf, by the way, but like that's the kind of thing. I think you find connections with people, and then it's organic. And if it's not organic, it's not going to really work, is it? Let's be honest. And there are other clients that I have a relationship with and network with that I don't ask many questions, because that's not what they want. Like where it's a slightly much more professional relationship, and I think it's judging the person you're in the room with and making them feel comfortable. And I think, and that's our job as a we're a caterer, we're a service industry. Like we're here to basically provide a service for people, and so the first job is to make people feel comfortable with who they're talking to, right? And then after that, the rest is the fun bit, the food, all that stuff. So I think if you don't do that, and then it just helps you down the line. You get trust. People they trust you to deliver, leave you to get on with it. There's lots of things that happen by creating that nice atmosphere. Really.
You talked about that sort of open house policy and the fact that you're quite like your mum.
Yeah.
How much do you think those early lessons from home and that sort of open house has contributed to the approach you have?
I would say the no shame is probably where, like, I'd say the start of my business, just no shame. I don't really care what I was so convinced and so convicted in my own idea and what I was doing, and that I thought it was right. I didn't care what anyone else thought, and people thought I was mad. Like the first pop-up I did in Balham, put 100 scrolls through my neighbours' doors. I went outside Balham tube station and flyered outside Balham tube station, just looking for, I was like, what was I doing? So I was like, I flyered outside Balham tube station, and I sent an email to the Balham Baptist Church in Balham and said, basically I was asking for 25 sets of crockery, 25 sets of cutlery, glassware, tables, three round tables and 25 chairs. And I would give them 2 free tickets for the community as a kind of in return. And they went for it. They were like, yeah, we'll do it. So, and I couldn't drive, right? So I had to go to the Balham Baptist Church, load all the chairs and tables into a taxi, right? And then drive the taxi. We go to taxi, we drop it all off at the house. We do 3 runs. And that was all the stuff there. And I'd drop it all off Friday. I'd spend the Friday setting it all up. I'd then go Friday morning, I'd go to Billingsgate first, Smithfield first. So I didn't even know that you could order stuff and it'd get delivered to your house. Like, it'd get delivered as a supply. This is how, naive I was right at the beginning. And so I'd go to Smithfield, get my meat done, bring it back in a suitcase on the tube, right?
Bet you were popular.
Bring it back in a suitcase. And it was all right at that time because it's too early. No, it's not busy.
And hopefully it was fresh.
Well, the second was very fresh, mate, straight out of the market. And the second one, then I drop that off, get that in the fridge, then I go straight back to Billingsgate, right? That's a different kettle of fish. Literally.
Yeah.
Right? So you get there and, this is the train to Canary Wharf. It is heaving. And so I'd buy my fish. They give the polystyrene cool boxes filled with ice, put it into the suitcase. and I'd go all the way back to thinking. And honestly, man, it was like
The
sometimes.
suitcase at that point then being tilted.
But on, and obviously, like fish on a tube is pretty smelly, and it was
People on the tube are pretty smelly, let alone
a
the
busy-
fish.
a busy
work at that time.
commuter tube. And I just remember sitting opposite this woman once, and she was trying to be so polite, and just like holding her nose like this. And anyway, so like classics really, but like so. I remember even then, I remember being on that tube, and I vividly remember being on that tube and having all these busy people, and really thinking to myself, "I'm the smug one here. Like I felt like I've got a purpose, and I feel like I'm following a dream that I've got." And I remember, I know like just no shame, like what's wrong with that? And I think then all that stuff, that taking the right advice from the right people is definitely something that. But my mum always used to have those kind of like. Doesn't matter what other people think, as long as you think in your head you're doing the right thing and like it's right for you and it's right for the people that you're helping or the people that you're doing it for, then like who cares what someone else thinks, it's nothing to do with them.
Love it. The no shame piece just means that you kind of aren't worried. And another one was saying comparison's the thief of joy is that actually if you're in your own world, without any influence or comparison, is actually, to your point, and I can just imagine you this blinker, this smile on your face.
For years.
With fish in your suitcase.
Wading through, but thinking I'm going to do what this is kind of your entrepreneurial
Exactly.
style.
You lot are all going to like, you're all working on the gravy train, and I was like, and I'm going in the opposite direction to like do my little thing.
Yeah.
And I would have never imagined in a million years at that time that what we were doing then was going to turn into the company it's turned into now, and honestly, it would have been in my wildest dreams to be doing this. So, I probably don't think about that enough actually, and like makes me a bit emotional talking about it, to be honest. So,
It's nice. And I want to ask you about that in a bit about that gratitude and this understanding and appreciation of the hard work and where it's got you. But you were mentioning there about this no shame piece, and in your letter you mentioned about the degree and kind of the business and economics, but actually then you taking a slightly different turn into the world of, was it trading or in it being a really bad decision, but
that was awful. Yeah.
Took that route in to then reverse you back.
Well,
talk us through about that, and actually then the acknowledgement or recognising this isn't for me, and how you dealt with it.
It's one thing I should probably put in. There's a big part. So I worked on a yacht when I was at university. I worked on a yacht as a chef for 3 years. Okay, so that was a big thing for me. And that was like, the guy who owned my yacht owned hotels and nightclubs all over the world.
This is below deck type scenario.
Not quite as big as. So it was 34 metre boat. So not quite. You're talking about 110 foot. So not quite the size of the below decks, and not as many crew. So but still. Very intense. But again, I went on that boat. I was 20 years old, had no, come from state school in Wakefield, had no as far as I'm concerned, you might have loads of money, but you're still a bloke, and I think it was really refreshing for him, because he'd probably previously had everybody trying to blow smoke up his bum for however long, and it's probably a bit exhausting. And actually, he just had someone who was a cheeky kid who was just cooking for him on the boat, and that worked really well. So I did that for 3 years, and then when I finished from there, I then took a pay cut to go and work as a broker on the yachts. So, as a broker in the city. I had a friend who was a broker, and I met his boss on a night out and got on with his boss really well, and his boss offered me a job. So there's a bit of a running theme here, isn't there? Just blag it. So no, he and his boss offered me the job. So I'd done a business and economics degree, so I thought, well, I should put this to the test and do it. And similar, after about 5 or 6 weeks, those hot flushes of going what am I doing here? And then after about 4 months, I was like, I saw in an advert, I saw in a Vice, I think it was, some guy was doing a 15-course menu, Japanese tasting menu somewhere, and it was the first time I'd ever seen or heard about the concept of a supper club, So I was like, oh, that sounds quite fun. I hate my job. I might just do something as an outlet for a bit of fun, and genuinely that was all it was. It was an outlet. It was a bit of pocket money because I was in 20 grand a year, and it was a bit of pocket money, but it was more of a chance to have a bit of fun and do something that I could be a bit proud of, really, rather than just trying to sit at a desk all day and get people's lunch, And I remember after about 6 months, I spent most of my time in that office writing menus, using the printer to print menus, buying parchment, buying fancy paper and then putting it in the work printer and then just printing it all off. It was just spent half my day, and I was just a bit and again, it's if they get wind of it, well, I'm not really that bothered because I'm not really that bothered about this job, So I did a few of those pop-ups while I was working, and even my bosses could see that I was really passionate about that and not so passionate about all the other stuff. And I went to go on holiday skiing, so I went to Courchevel for a holiday, and when I went on holiday, I was with my best mates who had been out there. We'd done seasons together before in Courchevel, and they were both managing different chalet companies, and they hated it, because the staff they had were terrible. They weren't providing a great experience for their guests, and they were not happy about that. And we had a bit of a brainstorm on a ski lift and decided we were going to set up our own chalet company. So I went back to London, called bosses into a room, said I was going to quit. They said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to set up a chalet company." They were like, "Righto." And then I went out to Courchevel, and that's what we did. And we set up a chalet company and a business on the total sum that it cost to set it up. I think it was about $2,500, and we had a ski business out there. So we managed to get a deal with a chalet owner, which I don't think he even realised. I went to go meet this guy. We found this chalet in Courchevel, chocolate box chalet, just outside off the ski lift, and it was to let for the following season. So I was labelled as the guy, the talker between the three of us. So I was like, "You go meet him." I was like, "All right." But both my mates are like proper mountain men, like huge beards, love skiing, but don't like people that much, kind of thing. So it was like sort of left to me to do the other stuff. And so I went to Paris, and I remember we were just by the Arc de Triomphe. I was meeting him in this cafe. I had no money, and I got there about 40 minutes early because I didn't want to mess it up. And I remember getting a latte, and it was about €15, and I think I am going to have to drink this for the next hour because I can't buy another one. And we did this deal, and the whole deal was that I didn't have to pay a deposit on the chalet until the 2nd of December. So by the beginning of December, which then meant I had 6 months to sell holidays. And that's what we did. So we set up a chalet company, and then I came back in the summer. I needed something to do, and that's how the pop-ups really started. So that's the kind of the food journey, if you like, in terms of how it started.
That sort of industriousness really comes through, just doing whatever it takes, going down different avenues, but also kind of being in the right place at the right time.
Definitely. I think I've been very lucky.
But that sense of industriousness and sort of doing whatever it takes and getting stuck in and not being afraid to sort of, pull the fish along the train or start something new. Where does that come from?
I think I just said I've always been very lucky, but I also think that I've made the most of the luck I've been given, and I think another clubby cliche phrase, fortune favours the brave, and I think if you don't put yourself out there, you'll never know how good a situation you're in if you don't see it to the end or see, or maximise that opportunity with whatever you're doing, really. And I think it comes back to the bit of advice about, saying yes. I think what's the worst? And this is the one thing as well. When I get really sometimes, don't get me wrong, I say yes and I go "Oh my God, what have I just agreed to?" And you go away and you might feel a bit sick for a minute, or you might, but then you turn that panic into action. And I always think if they can do it, I can do it. We're all just people, right? And I think and what's the worst that's going to happen? No one's going to die today. I hope not anyway. But
especially on your one.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? And it's you have to sometimes, and I have to rationalise it. I still today have to rationalise stuff. I still panic, still obviously get overwhelmed with things. I'm still only human, but the rationalising is this is what you want.
I love that because we so much of my personal journey, but also seeing so many of peers and colleagues, I often have this conversation that says growth only comes when you get uncomfortable. So sometimes you have to put yourself in those places and say yes to things that you don't think you should, or you're not ready for, or feel too big, because that's where growth happens. So if it feels a bit uncomfortable, you're probably doing something right. So I always say we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Absolutely,
you're gonna grow.
You mentioned you've got a big example, or at least one of the first big ones of saying yes. And
so
I mean, apart from
I've got quite
getting a chalet without having a company, and apart from being a trader but doing pop-ups, and apart from all these,
I was a rubbish trader, by the way. I was proper rubbish. Yeah, no one wanted me to stay at that desk as much as I didn't want to be there, so it was fine.
It's a mutually convenient decision.
It was. I think they were like, oh, good.
What's the biggest one then that you've kind of
biggest say yes? Okay, so. The first big job I did, which is probably, I guess, in context of that, and would probably be, from that, was the Lauder Lounge at again, this comes back to the Loud Lounge at V Festival, which I think we know about.
Yeah.
And so it's a VIP area for Virgin at V Festival. And so if I go back a little bit, before I launched the pop-ups, me and my mates used to get employed by a company called Run Ragged at Louder Lounge. Do you remember? Do you ever know
I
that?
do, yeah.
So Run Ragged basically used to like do hospital concierge, if you like, for the VIPs that would come to. So basically put them in some like branded clothes, drive them around on golf buggies, make sure they had drinks. Me and my mates used to basically work for free for the weekend to do that and drive the golf buggies, like, you know, drive Cara Delevingne around on a golf buggy for the afternoon. It's just
Tough
funny.
gig.
Yeah, exactly,
Tough gig.
exactly. And I think our best moment was singing. We had like all the One Direction guys were all like drinking around near our golf buggy, and we burst into the Wanted song, just the As You Came, Glad You Came, that we thought was hilarious. I don't think they even noticed. But anyway, so I did that for free, and that weekend we had crew catering, and I remember eating the crew catering and being like, this is a bit rubbish. And the guys that were all there, all the teams and stuff, were thinking, oh, the food's so crap and stuff like this. So I was like trying to find out who was running the Loud Lounge. So I found
Michael White.
Enter Michael White and enter Mona Matadi. And then I was like, basically, I really want to pitch for this. And again, you know, you hand yourself up. I've been doing pop-ups, been doing this, you know. Here's some reviews, and like just said, look, I won't let you down. And I think that's been a big thing for me. Is like my name is on the door, and I think and I'm still very involved, and I think I'm very invested, and I'm very accountable. Do you know what I mean? And I think I'd like to think that clients and people see that, you know, like the book does stop with me, and I will be there, and I will, you know, if there's a fire, I'll be in it, putting it out with you, you know, like it's not like I'm gonna I won't leave it, you know.
How do you going to do that as the business continues to scale and grow?
Well, I would say the people that I've got now, we have, you know, I think they're amazing, you know, like they are all the way we approach clients is like I said to you, it's a service industry, right? It's not there is not a set menu, and people are so quick to say no. Like people, like just in general, you know, like, and like when you think about it, like why, like for me, and I don't know if it comes back to, you know, the kind of like upbringing that I've had, but like someone's spending the amount of money they're spending with us on events and on the food, and they can have whatever they want, you know, like they you know, that we're not going to kind of be dictated with them. And it might mean, you know, it might mean sometimes it's sausage rolls, and sometimes it's pork pies, other times it's caviar, but like it's the best sausage roll you've had, yeah, and it'll be served in the best way we can, you know, with a smile, and like and that's the way to do it. It's like we'll give you what you want, and we'll do it the best we can, you know. Sorry, we digressed again. I'm moving off on a tangent.
That's all right. We'll bring you back. It's all good.
Rope me back in.
The question was about the biggest yes, when actually you perhaps weren't not necessarily prepared or structured for it.
Sorry. So anyway, I managed to blag myself onto an Itch job to do the crew catering. So I then had a tasting at Itch's offices with the client, Simon Dornan, who now works with us. I had a tasting with the client. It went really, really well. And then they're like, yeah, it's yours. It's like, oh God, okay. And I remember going to the site, clearing out all of my business bank account to do this job. I remember being in Booker's with my mum. Mum helped them, came and washed up with me. They were never going to let me. They were going to be right there with me. So Mum came and washed up with me. Dad helped as well. Dad, we were all drinking Monster, you know, the energy drink.
Yes.
And he was like, let me have a little bit of that. And he had a can of Monster, and then the next day he was like, Jimmy, you need to stay off that stuff, it's bad stuff. He's like, I haven't slept all night. It's all right, Dad, I can handle it. But yeah, you know, and I cleared out my bank account. I remember walking around thinking, if they don't pay me on this, if this goes, you know, I'm kind of, and I was like, actually, we'll just do it the best we can. And honestly, it was the biggest hit. And I think they changed crew caterers every year for 5 years, and we kept that contract for every year until the Louder Lounge no longer existed. So and I do think as well, like a big part of that was, we were serving like, it's home cooked food, but we were serving it with like enthusiasm, with energy, and with like a real like we really cared, you know. Like, and I think that it's not, so I always say it's not always what you do, it's the way you do it, you know. Like, and like it's true, you know, like we're in such a saturated industry, you know, like all of us are, you know. There's millions of people who can cook and caterers out there, so it's how you make people feel is what people remember.
You mentioned a couple of names there, like Mike and a few others, and it's seemingly a running thing where obviously you form these bonds and relationships, you then prove yourself, and that then kind of continues. Given obviously what we do, and obviously you're now part of as well in terms of that offering advice and that mentoring side of things. You mentioned in your letter a couple of key people.
Yeah.
You've obviously got loads of people that, you know, throughout time, and these names kind of crop up, and I've worked with them there, I met them there, and 10 years later they're kind of doing the biggest job ever. Talk us through a couple of these key people, and obviously you mentioned your dad being one of them, but you mentioned one or two others that played such a pivotal part.
Yeah,
not so much in necessarily a client sense, but more so perhaps in further guidance and advice and that mentoring role that you've had.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think I remember I spent a long time in a middle patch of my business when I had you'd have that middle bit, right, where you've got your kind of friends working for you, and that always, and a lot of people I've spoken to, there always comes a sticking point for that. You know, when it's time to kind of like move the friends away into being friends more, you know, and more into that employment side. And I always think that there comes a time when your business grows to that point, when it's time to like stop leaning on people for favors. And do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I remember around that time, I just used to get so many people telling me how they would do it. And you just think, like, if you would do it, like, just go and do it, you know. And I remember, and I always remember saying, take advice from the right people. And for me, I have a big thing about, if you've done it, I want to see it, because that's what I'm buying into. If you're telling me from your ivory tower, having never done this, or from from your
like
comfortable armchair,
on the stand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, how would I respond? Why would I drive that? Because what experience have you got telling me that? You know. So I've had a few people. So Pamela Price, who is my one of my best friends, to be honest. Like, she's she's 88 now, and she.
Imagine the two of you now just sat there having a good old giggle. And
mate, we go to Hawksmoor for dinner, and everyone's like, you can see when we go for dinner, like, what is this relationship? She's like effing and blinding at me over the table, like, you know, I'm like picking off her plate, and they're like, are they in a relationship? Are they like, is that his grandma? Like, what's the thing?
I love that.
Well, yeah,
I don't care.
Exactly.
Why not?
And again, you know, that comes back to the whole point. Who cares? Like, you know, it's nothing to do. That's no big deal. And like that, when I first started, so basically, she had a kitchen in Clapham. Okay, she was a retired caterer, but had an out kitchen in her home. So she had this home, and then she had a kitchen attached to it, which was a registered catering kitchen. Nothing much going on there. There was a guy there at Borough Market doing like baking once a week for his Borough Market store. So I started off renting the kitchen off her for 30 quid a day to start with, right? Then it went up to 80 quid a day. Then it was £500 a month. And you know, like, that opportunity to do that on such, like, and she just loved seeing someone like me in there who was just like going for it, you know? And like, don't get me wrong, she used to have a go at me most times, but like, there's so many funny things I could tell you. Like, so we had her garden is this amazing garden in Old Clapham, right? So after a while of working in that kitchen and taking so much, I didn't even know how to cost a job up, right? So I used to be like, how much should I charge? 35 quid a head, you know, like, and then you get to the end of it and you're like, I've got no money left after I've like got all my plates and everything. And she was like, I remember she showed me how to price, like, no, you charge your equipment separately, and you charge your food separately, and you charge your staff separately. And I remember like, well, that's an eye opener.
That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, that's good. But you know, like, all these things that you just don't. How would you know? You know. And then she's like, you do know you can get your veg and your meat and your fish delivered. And I was like, really? You know, and like lots of things like that. But like, she had a huge open door policy as well, right? So again, like, we used to have everyone and anyone come into this apple in her garden, where we after a few years of running it in the kitchen, we outgrew that kitchen, you know, like, because it was a bit of a cottage industry kitchen, and we were just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So then we moved to a kitchen in Tulsa. But I loved Pam, and then that whole relationship just had to carry on. And she had this garden that was just, it still is, like, magical, right? So you'd walk along down Iverley Road, and you'd get to this like walkway. You'd walk in to her front door, then you walk through an iron gate, you walk round, and it was just like this oasis of like vegetable patches, beehives, berry trees, elderflower trees. Like, it was like a secret garden. Honestly, it was stunning. And we turned it into a pop-up restaurant, that space. Like, and Pam also used to rent her garden out to campers, right? So I was paying her like 150 quid a night to run this restaurant, to basically hire the garden for the night to run the restaurant. It was 150 quid. £500 a week it worked out for 3 nights a week. So it's like, you know, 26 grand a year. And then at like one night we turned up to set up. It's an outdoor restaurant with the barbecues. One night we turned up to set up, and there's like a tent where the table was going to go, and I'm like, Pam, She said, well, they're paying £24. I was like, Pam, I don't care how much they're paying. Like, I've got guests coming. I've got guests coming in 2 hours, and you've got them in it. So she's like, okay, I'll tell them to leave. So these poor people, we had to like pack the tent away from them, and then at 10 o'clock when all the guests had leave, we had to help them put the tent back out. And like, you know, times when I'd be like, Pam, guests are coming in half an hour, can you put your bra on, because she'd be outside sunbathing in the garden before the guests are arriving. It's just like, can't write it. But again, you know, like from her, she shameless, you know, like from her it was like, you do you and do it well and don't worry about the noise around it. So and she was always quick to give me advice, always quick to give me advice, and then always and lead by it. You know, from her, you'd see that.
She cooked for the Queen Mum, right? You say in the letter.
She cooked for it. She ran all the boats, so that didn't run all the river boats. She cooked for the Queen Mum. She still owns a venue in Clapham Junction. Do you know Wessex House?
Yes.
You ever heard of that? Yeah. So she owns that. Yeah, very, very.
So when you say take advice from the right people, not only was Pam is Pam a legend by the sounds of things,
Absolute
but
legend,
she really knew what she
Pam's
was doing.
done it, you know. Pam's done it, and Pam's been where I'm wanting to go, you know. And I remember once taking a job with 48 hours notice in. There's a couple of funny bits here. 48 hours notice, and I got off the phone, and it was 400 people, and it was like sliders, some bits and bobs, and some skewers and stuff. And I got off the phone, and I was like, oh, Pam, I shouldn't have taken that. And she went, what are you talking about? Of course you fucking should. Come on, let's go. And I was like, okay, all right, yeah, let's go. You know, like,
we're doing this.
48 hours later, I'm in the, you know, the M&M's, you know, the M&M store.
Yeah.
You know, there's some dodgy venues up there, above there. And I went to go, so that's where I did the venue. I left my bain-marie there, right, after the event, because I couldn't load out because the party was still going on. And that weekend I was on another job somewhere, and my mum was down for the weekend looking at me to see my sisters. So I was like, Mum, I've left this bain-marie over at above the M&M store. Can you do me a favour? Can you just go and get it? Because they're pestering me to get it out. So it's fine. So she goes there. About half an hour later, I get this call from my mum, and she's screaming down the phone. She's like, who are these people you're working with? What is this that you're doing? Basically, she's gone to the wrong floor, okay? she's gone to the wrong floor, and the floor beneath is full of like babe station models, all like sat on the sofa with the boobs out, doing the whole like
with a phone,
with the sex casting thing. No. Yeah, exactly. And she's like,
not that I've seen it before.
Apparently, yeah.
Like,
so she's like, who? What is this? And I was like, Mum, like. It took me a while to explain. She was like, I think you need to come back to Wakefield. They
still need to eat.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. They love the chicken sliders. But yeah, so that was a bit of a moment. So Pam was and still is, you know, an incredible influence on me. My dad as well has always been an amazing influence. Less so on business, because I think he'd probably say, you know, he'd probably made a few mistakes on his way on that, less so in the business, but more so in just the way he is with people and the way he always has been. You know, everybody loves my dad; he's a ledge. So yeah, on that side, and then, you know, I have people now that I'm still taking advice from and listening to, and, you know, people like Richard Groves, who works with me, my MD. You know, again, the premise of me hiring him is that he will not let me make the same mistakes he might have made in when he was at this point. And, you know, that's the whole point. You know, like,
it's a premise of a mentor, right?
That's exactly what people who've walked in your shoes is for me the place to take advice. Or where you not even walked in your shoes, walked in the shoes you want to walk in. You know, that's where I take the biggest advice from people, and respect. You know, like, it's very easy for people to tell you what they think you should do.
Yeah, everyone's an expert from the sidelines.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, but no one really knows what it's like unless you're in the mixer. You know, so yeah.
You're doing it a bit differently, and you mentioned in the letter to yourself is that, you know, this kind of have faith, trust your gut, and things like that. But now you're kind of blazing a slightly different trail and running the business almost like an agency now, which actually, if you're conforming to others, that you wouldn't have. So I suppose with that in itself, it's where did that come from? What was the intuition to do things differently?
Yeah, do you know what? It's interesting because we get a lot of people. In fact, almost everyone says you guys are so different, or like, you know. And I probably am not the best person to tell you what that is that makes us so different, because, like, I've never worked for another caterer, I've never worked for another agency, and so all I know is that what the way we're doing and the approach we're doing is what is the best way I know how. You know, like, and that's it, and that's taken. Probably from, like, the yachts, when, you know, I had a pretty abusive Italian captain. Drilled it into me pretty quickly that no is not an answer that you have on this boat. Do you understand? It's like, okay, I understand. Yeah, you know. So 4 people come for dinner. Jimmy, we're going to dinner around 11 o'clock. There'll be 4 of us. Is that okay? I'm like, yeah, cool, no problem. 11 o'clock comes and goes. Midnight comes and goes. Get to like 1:30. All of a sudden, 12 people turn up on the boat. You're like, it's fine though, isn't it? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. And you're going downstairs thinking, how many pieces can I cook this monkfish into before it looks like I've cut it into pieces. So that was always a big part of that. It was like, you know, having not been in my vocabulary and that. So, I think all of those points has probably brought us to the way that we're trying to run this. And it comes back to that point. It's like it's a service-led business for me. You know, like, yeah, we cook our food, and we have food that we love to cook, and we have a subliminal way of doing it. And our thing at the moment is that our approach to it is, what do you want? What's the event? How do you want it to be? Then we go away and we try and put the layers on that. And then when we do, and what's the message, you know? And then when we've done that, it's kind of like, well, that's the event as a whole. Does that feel like that's what you want to see and what you want to tell? And I think, like I said to you, it's trying to do it the best way you can. Yeah. And that's just kind of what we've always done. You know, I honestly couldn't exactly tell you what I think. I think we're super flexible. I know that because why wouldn't we be? You know, like, again, but you know, like, why not? You know, like, and it's just that, like, for us to kind of be able to change numbers, or to be able to, there's always a way of doing things, right? And there's you guys know, in events and catering, there's about 1 million ways to skin a cat, you know, and like, more often than not, you can find a way of making it work. Making what the clients work by being honest and open about the compromises you're going to have to make because of budgets or things like that. You know what I mean? And
we were saying what made you different, and in terms you were saying it sets you apart, and obviously the experiences from chefing, and no means no, but how many kind of ways you skin a cat and what sets you apart, things like that.
Exactly, and I think so. You know, when we go into stuff like, I think we've been known for the weird and wacky and wonderful, and now people kind of do come to us for that. We had a phase for a long time where we were like the donut guys, because we do these walls where we don't just we put donut wall, but then we have artists painting whatever you want on the donut wall. So whether that's a logo, whether that's a message, and then at the end of the event, the guests take it away. I mean, it's so 2019, but you know, it was done now. So you know, we did that, and then we also did a big job for Google as an example. You know, 2,000 people, and we were doing desserts, and they'd historically had issues on this event with people queuing for the food stations and just having huge queues, and they didn't want to do that. So we're like, right, we've got an idea that's going to be really cool, but is also going to mean there's no queues. And we put a massive tree in the venue. We put 2,000 desserts and hung them all underneath the tree and called it the Tree of Treats. So basically, you would just,
nice.
And the guests would just pass underneath, grab the dessert, and walk along, and it was like brilliant. We might have done that a couple of times now, but you know, like, and that's the whole part is like, actually, let's figure it out. Let's have some fun. We're doing a job in a couple of weeks where we're doing the tasting was like epic, you know, like, so, you know, because we're all like, is this going to work? And it works. So we're doing a wall, which is cookie bricks. So it's bricks of cookie that are this big, right? And then we've got spray paints, but it's like edible, like purees basically that you can spray out. So like flavored paint. So the idea is, and it's a New York themed party, so the idea is
this sounds epic.
The guests get a spray gun, can go and tag their brick, do what they want, and then they can pick the brick off and take it away, and then just go and eat their brick on the wall. That's their piece of like art that they've made. So that's happening in a couple of weeks. But I remember at the tasting, we're like, this is great, guys. You know, and I was like, it works.
I love those ideas. So many of the things that I've done in my career, you sort of walk in and try and sell it into a client, and you're like, they're never going to buy this, or it's never going to work, and then they do it, and you're like, I guess
we better figure it out then.
Right.
Yeah. So we did a good example actually is a meta job that we do every year. We've done it for 8 years in Cannes, and one of the agencies, and I won't say who it was, but they're great. But they'd basically sold this idea into the client, and then came to us and were like, so we've sold this into the client, we've got no idea how to make it work, can you help? And I was like, oh god. And you know, we did, and we made it. It was a color changing cocktail basically, and we made it work, and you know, we went and figured it out, and then it was it was basically around pride and equality, so the idea of like, you know, changing colors and stuff. So but again, you know, that's really satisfying for us, because that's our job, is to like to find solutions to stuff, you know. So, yeah.
You mentioned they're gratifying and the satisfaction there. A point you made earlier, and it mentions it in your letter, is about that gratitude and an appreciation and kind of taking a moment and things. You're obviously on a journey, and I know how old you are, and you're not that old. You're clearly kind of nowhere even halfway there. You're getting a bit emotional when you almost start thinking about all the stuff you've done. How do you make sure that you stay grounded, but you make time for this kind of acknowledgement yourself, but also do it in such a way that you are still driven to keep going? So it's a balance, but love to hear how you do it. Or
to be honest, I'd say I probably struggle with it, a little bit. I think, to be honest, because it's interesting. Like I don't stop and think enough how far we've come, and I think that's probably why I'm so as grounded as I am, and because I actually it's really important to not pay attention to the noise, because like it's just noise. Do you know what I mean? And that always is and will be the case, So and outside of that noise, what's the most important thing? Well, it's your family, and it's keeping my business going. But like, what's the most important thing is your family, really, isn't it? And I think looking back on that, the journey that we've come onto, I don't think I realise what we've done until I talk about it at times like this now, and I'm like, actually, that is quite cool. And I think, and a lot of people go, oh, it's pretty amazing. You're like, yeah, it's all right. Cheers, because over time, I'm sure you guys, you're on a journey yourselves. Over time, everything happens as it goes along, that it molds into this one big long journey that it's really easy to forget that I was like running to the market with a suitcase, and so I think that's a big part of it. I think when I do stop and realise it, I think I without being eggy, I'm proud of what we've done, and proud of the team that I've had to help me do that. So that's, I get quite emotional again. It's easy.
How did you find the letter?
I found it really cathartic, actually, and I because I think probably most of it, I suffer from imposter syndrome. I put all those things that, like, how do we get here so quickly? Like, do I even deserve that? And all those things that kind of go through your mind because you've just been on this hamster wheel for so long, and it's all of a sudden you turn around, and you're like, wow, look at what we're doing. Am I the right guy to do it? Can I do this? And the answer is yes. And it's that whole thing about trusting your gut and telling that guy that's questioning everything to get out of the room, put the confident guy in the room. But like everybody else, we all have the little niggle and those little doubts. It's just trying to kick them away or deal with them.
And you mentioned that your name's on the door, that the buck stops with you, and in your letter you talk about actually sometimes needing that separation from work. So how do you separate yourself from something?
I think sometimes I've found it can be quite hard with your team dynamic, I think, because I feel like I want my chefs, I want them to be the stars of the show, but it's always, with my name at the door of it, it's always going to be that the Jimmy's the one running this, So there's an element of that, but also it's so personal to me, and it always has been. And I don't know if it would change without the name. I don't know if it would make a difference to the way I would operate. To be honest, it wouldn't probably, but it would. I imagine I just take things so personally, and I've got better at that as I get older, because you get thicker skin, don't we all, and you realise you can't please everyone, and and that's okay, and we're okay with that. But yeah, I think the early years I took it hard, it's just hard when you name it, and when you can't be in control of absolutely everything, and things happen outside of your control, that ultimately it comes back on you, and you've got to deal with that. There's nowhere else to look and nowhere else to turn. You're the one who's got to pick up the pieces and go and get it sorted. So that is the thing, and it's not. I've had amazing times, right? There's been some brilliant things that we've done, and I've cooked for some incredible people, and I've been really fortunate that now I've got an amazing team. There's that sticky bit, I think, when I was going from working with my friends to trying to get out of building a business more and not be so coal-faced. That's when it's really hard, because your friends, they're like, well, where are you tonight? I'm like, well, there's 6 events on tonight. I can't be everywhere, and it's kind of that understanding of how that goes. And then as we get slightly bigger now, and we have, a senior management team, all these little things that over the years you just develop. It just started. It was just myself to start with, and then all of a sudden that that becomes, and I think as our companies progressed, I think it's my name at the door, and there's a person to it, but I think we've become a bit of a brand as well. And I think so. I think I always say, there's loads of Jimmys in my team. There's loads of Jimmys who come on events and will deliver you incredible food and incredible hospitality. That's
a nice way.
That's your hallmark.
Yeah, because that's how we want it to be, and everybody knows that.
So with us rounding then to the end, and we've got the big question coming, what would you say, and if you were to briefly summarise kind of the next 10 years or so, is what's the future ambition for yourself and the business, or the two being the one?
Well, you could probably imagine from the conversation we just had, I've only ever thought about 6 months ahead. So, so 5 years, 10 years is really a long time. But honestly, I think for me and where the journey we're on, I think that the kind of momentum that we've got at the moment, I think it's trying to get into more great venues, do more great things, and with the clients that we're working with, we're on a path just keeping that trust up, so keeping to it and do bigger and bigger things. So I've there's thoughts about an office abroad has been floated around. We do a lot of work in Europe, how to make that a bit easier. Over the next few years, it's just kind of keeping on enjoying the ride and seeing what comes up and trying to keep growing the business and keeping a good team with me, really.
Yeah.
So we come to that point, Jimmy, where we ask the question. So we've scattered around it a little bit and we've touched on it a little bit, but it'd be great to hear that one piece of advice that is so good you have to share it.
Yeah, just say yes. I think would be. I'll be a yes man. I think don't be afraid to say yes to something that you haven't done before or that you think is maybe beyond you, and work it out afterwards. And it'll be all right, and if it isn't, what's the worst that's going to happen? At least you can say you gave it a go, and that's the other thing. I think you're never going to regret the things you're never going to regret the things that you did. You could always regret the things you didn't do, and I think.
I don't know, there's a few in the closet that I'm like,
Yeah.
I was also about to say there's two
They're
pieces
just lessons,
of advice.
regrets are lessons, right?
Two pieces of advice there.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd say that's kind of it, really.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Really
Thank you very much.
appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers, Jimmy.
I actually have a couple of little cookbooks for you both. Actually.
Oh, no
There
way.
you go. So a bit of cooking at home.
That's what you were running about with.
So there's one for you. There you go.
Thank you very much.
There's one for you.
All guests know, presents are welcome.
Oh, what a shame. This is our first shameless plug, cookbook.
Oh.
Amazing. And when does this come out?
It's been out for a long time. Yeah, it's been out for a few years now.
So for those listening and not watching, social eats, food to impress your mates. I know what I'm going to pull out next time, Matt.
Sunday
Matt's
Times, that's
coming over.
legit as
There
well.
you go,
hey?
mate.
That's not just Pete doing it on socials, that's legit, isn't
It's
it?
in print.
It's in print. Brilliant. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so
Pleasure. Thank you very
much.
much.
It's not every day you have such a refreshing conversation. I mean, the passion from him was so evident, and his emotions at points really came through, and you can see that this isn't just a business to Jimmy. This is what he does.
It's life, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
it's part of him.
where he is at the moment is such an interesting part of the journey, and it feels like that journey, but one that he's so enthusiastic and passionate about. We were talking about it after, even in a brief reflection, it's these stages that he's gone through on this journey, this really hands-on, raw and ready approach, from dragging monkfish from Canary Wharf and
I feel sorry for anyone that was on the train that day.
But doing, whilst he's working as a trader, doing £10 supper clubs for his mates, just to be able to do something he's passionate about, and then finding that passion kind of evolve into then this incredible multi-million-pound business. And still now he's getting in there, getting his hands dirty and really working hard for it, because I think, as he said, it doesn't feel like work. It is kind of what he loves.
And I think what's been lovely about learning more about Jimmy's journey and the way that he shared it was this, I guess, naivety in many ways of, well, I'm going to go and do this and I like that, and charging your mates 10 quid and not knowing how to charge up, businesses and whatnot. But just that ability to step into things and go through things and being unafraid about the outcome and going, oh, okay, that wasn't right. Being a trader wasn't right. Okay, cool. I'm going to go and do this
it's like
thing.
an innocence to it.
Yeah. And I think so many people often think they have to have it all figured out. Right. This is my path. This is my journey. This is what I'm going to do. This is how much I'm going to charge. This is what I think sometimes the joy of figuring it out and being flexible enough and able enough to go, that's not right for me, so I'm going to go down this path because that feels better, and just seeing where that leads you and understanding that it's all part of your personal journey and tapestry of the skills that you have, the experiences you have, that makes you unique. Like in many ways, nothing's a wrong turn, and I think so much of his journey has shown that.
And what he said about it, right, it's that learning. You mentioned about this area where you put yourself into these uncomfortable situations, that's where you grow the most. The last thing I want to kind of point out as part of that reflection piece is I don't think I've ever met anyone quite like Jimmy, and I'm a big ambassador for connections and working hard to give more than you get and things like that. But Jimmy has his authenticity and innocence to him, and I mentioned that he meets people, and because he cares so much about what he does, and when he does meet people, he wants to just help and things like that. The amount of opportunities that have come from it, and when I've talked about networking, that dirty word and things, it's that actually it's not. It's about meeting people and talking about the things that mutually care about, and when it connects, it does. But you have to then be ready for when that turns back around and an opportunity arises to capitalise on it. And the weird and wild and 48 hours to turning around a dinner for 400 and things, these are opportunities that arise from those relationships, providing that value. But if you don't capitalise on them, then you can't expand or leverage this network. It doesn't work. So for him, that readiness, that yes factor, the innocence perhaps, or at least even the willingness to try and maybe not get it right, has just meant that he has carved out this slight, I don't know, people would say that he's disrupting the industry. I think he's just doing it the way that he wants. He said it's the way that I know how.
Yeah.
And that's become this natural disruption and meant that he's a standout individual and with a standout business. So I love the conversation.
Great conversation. I think the other thing that really stood out for me is this sense of him not limiting himself by what he thinks a caterer should be, or what has been done in the industry already. Like you said, it's just him doing his thing, going about it in the way that he thinks is best, and by all accounts, smashing it.
Yeah. Lovely chat as well.
Yes.
Elevate operates thanks to the generosity of our partners and supporters. To find out more about them, you can check them out via our website, elevateme.co. Together, we're changing lives, careers, and the events industry for the better.
This podcast was powered by Wonder, the independent specialist creative business-to-business and business-to-employee events agency. And a huge thanks goes to our producer and fellow team elevator, Pete Kerwood.